call. Today joining me is my colleague Marie, so we're going to tag team this presentation together. And then we also have other colleagues from our division that I see. Our director, our ADD, Dr. Hamley is on the call, as well as our acting supervisor, Margot Delon. And so, and a few others are on the call as well. So thank you for joining us. So this is our first technical assistance webinar that we're providing on the 21st Century Grant application for 2019-2022. I know many of you were anxiously waiting on this application, so we're glad that we have it announced and looking forward to working with you in this application process. We have several webinars scheduled, and we'll review that at the end of this presentation on when those will take place. But we want to begin now because we want to make sure that we cover all the information, because there's about 40 slides. And we have a lot of introduction information that we need to get through, and then as well as going down to the pieces of the application in itself. Because we have about 55 callers on now, it was going to be challenging if I unmute everyone at some point, because a lot of the background noise, because some folks have a challenge in muting their own phones on their end. So what we tend to do on these calls is to pose some questions in the chat box as we go through, and either Marie or myself will look at those questions and respond to those questions. And then at the end, if we do have a few minutes, I'll go ahead and unmute everyone, and then that way we can address some of the questions we weren't able to address during the call. So the application now has been officially announced. It was officially announced Tuesday, January 22nd. We had a little bit of a holdup just because of the shutdown, but we got the official okay to announce the information. So we're happy to begin that process. So the applications, as you know, have been distributed via email through your ADDs, and you possibly received that from your school improvement specialists at your ERCs or your education program administrators. We hope to get the applications uploaded on the BIE website, but again, just making that connection with the folks in the central office to make that happen, because we know that the shutdown has impacted some folks there. So it'll be a little bit more time, I think, before we can get that uploaded. But if you do need an application, certainly request that in the chat box. We can send that to you, as well as our webinar announcements that we've provided. So the deadline for the application is March 25th, 2019. So you have about approximately 60 days to submit your application. And then we anticipate making award notifications by May 31st, 2019. This is a 3-year grant cohort from 2019 to 2022. And of course, it's always contingent upon availability of funds and meeting application requirements. So as you know, and usually we generally preface a lot of our webinars with this overview of what 21st century programs are, and it's academic enrichment opportunities for children who attend high poverty and low performing schools. So again, the whole intent of the program is that we assist students to meet those state and local standards in core academic subjects and raise their student achievement. The question a lot of folks may have is, what is a community learning center? So here on the screen provides a definition of what that is. And again, providing that support in meeting state academic standards and meeting that regular academic program during the day. So as we talk to our current grantees, the program's, a community learning center is not more of the day program, but it complements the day program. So it's engaging, it's enriching. We do have a lot of our current grantees that do tutoring programs as part of their 21st century program, and so that can be a little challenging, just for the fact that it's hard to measure, it's hard to keep engaging, but we'll talk a little bit about those kinds of things as we move forward into this technical assistance training. Addition, we also want to look at how does the community learning center provide services to families of students, because we know that parental involvement and family engagement is a critical piece in the students' learning. So how is our centers providing those supports and reaching out to our families and our communities? Okay, Marie, you can take the next few slides.
Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Marie Silver Hatband, and in terms of looking at the general information for the program purpose, Valerie just provided information of what a community learning center is, and so when we're looking at the program purposes, we authorize under the ESSA, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, as you know, Every Student Succeeds Act. And so again, just as mentioned previously, the programmatic components of your 21st century is to provide those opportunities of academic enrichment for those students who are low performing, and then also helping them meet those challenging state academic standards, and then also providing additional services and programs and activities. And so we provided, there's some activities here on the slide that will give you some ideas of what those additional services, programs, and activities would be. And then also, again, we want to really focus on your programs offering support to families as well, families of those students who are participating in your program, and ensuring that your program does include opportunities for literacy and related academic educational development for your families. Next slide. Okay, so the other one is who is eligible to apply. We wanted to really focus on this as well. And in terms of who can apply for this grant, is we're looking at the LEAs, the local education agencies, which are your schools. So schools that are Bureau funded, whether you're Bureau operated or tribally controlled, you're eligible to apply for this program, and as well as residential programs that are Bureau funded. And so those programs are eligible to apply. And if you're currently part of the cohort, that's this grant cycle right now, which is ending this June, you're also eligible to apply for this 21st century sub-grant as well. However, we're also letting you know too that if you are part of a state Department of Education sub-grant cohort, then you're not eligible to apply. So it's only if you're not part of, if you don't have a program, the 21st century program, then you are eligible to apply.
So let me clarify that. So there's, of course, all of our states do provide 21st century opportunities. The state of New Mexico, I'll use for example, has an application. They do a competition. And if, say, for your school, you're in that competition process or are receiving funding from your state for 21st century, you wouldn't be eligible to apply for this grant.
Thank you, Valerie. So next slide. And so those were the pieces for the general information. And now we're in terms of looking at the grant requirements. One of the grant requirements is that there's a statement of assurances. And so when you do start looking at your grant application, there's going to be a statement of assurances that need to be signed by the authorized school representative and as well as your school board. So if you go through that list of assurances and, you know, just you signing that state of assurances that you're going to activities or that you are meeting those requirements. The other one is your BIE consolidated school application. This is something that we're looking at as well as we're looking, because the 21st Century program is not a standalone, and it's a supplemental program, discretionary grant. We're looking at this as part of your school-wide application process. So as you're planning for the upcoming school year, we're going to look for that alignment and how you're including this program into your school-wide school improvement process, so that we know that, you know, your program activities, the different programming that you're going to have in place is supplementing what you're doing as a school. And some of the things that we're going to be looking at too is, you know, how you're selecting the indicators of effective practices to ensure that you're making those alignments. And then also integrating after school programs with the regular school day program. Again, this is just part of that alignment, and that the 21st Century program is not a standalone. So that we want to ensure that if you're a recipient, that you are integrating these programs with, you know, how and working with the regular school day. And as we mentioned before, under the program purpose and the definition of what a community learning center is that, you know, we want to make sure that your activities, the program does complement the school day activity, because your overall goal is going to be to helping those students make those academic gains. Next slide. And looking at your measures of effectiveness, this is another area that we will be looking at in terms of, you know, ensuring that that there's that ongoing evaluation happening. And one of, just as defined in the Every Student Succeeds Act, that every subgrant applicant is going to, you know, be following an assessment of objective data regarding the need for a before and after school or even a summer program, and also establishing a set of performance measures, and then to ensure that you are implementing a high quality program, and then looking to see, making sure that your activities, your program is evidence-based research. And then also that there is that alignment with the regular academic day program. And then also the collection of data to measure the student's success. And then also a periodic evaluation to assess the program's progress toward achieving your goals. So in looking at your periodic evaluation, we will have you go through a periodic evaluation throughout the grant cycles, and how, you know, the results of those evaluations, we want you to be able to use that to refine, improve, and strengthen your program. And then also just looking at how you're making those results available to the public, and then how you're using that to continue your program. And so, and also, those are, you know, just part of the periodic evaluation. What we're also going to have also at the end of the cohort is do an evaluation report, and that's covering your whole the 3 years that you have this grant. And looking at another grant requirement is meeting the Government Performance and Results Act of 1993, which is your GEPRA. And that's part of the federal reporting requirement. And so in this current cohort, all the recipients are providing information, data back to us at the end of every semester, and that gets reported back to the U.S. Department of Education. And so right now, in terms of looking at GEPRA for the 21st century, the performance indicators, it's primarily focused on student achievement, student behavior, participation in core educational services, and then also participation in other enrichment activities. And so when we're looking at the federal 21st century performance objectives to meet the GEPRA goals, the first objective is to make sure that the participants demonstrate educational and social benefits and that they exhibit those positive behavioral changes. And then also that you're offering high quality enrichment opportunities that would affect student outcomes such as student attendance, academic performance, and then also decrease in disciplinary actions. And then also the third GEPRA objective is to improve the operational efficiency of the program. Val, you want to take it from here?
All right, thanks, Marie. So as we go through these grant requirements, these are applicable to when you apply and you get selected for the grant. These are the things that you're going to have to do. So we want to review these with you guys really quickly because, there's a lot of things that are involved in the application. So we want to make sure that we get that clear with you so that you have an understanding of what's required before you apply. So the authorized activities they're listed as we go in further as you complete the application. And so you'll find those listed, but there's certain activities that's listed in ESSA that are described as authorized activities for before school and after school activities. So you want to make sure that you take a look at that. We're also wanting to look at your evidence-based interventions and activities. So again, even being that you have activities that you select activities that are authorized, you want to make sure that they're evidence-based by looking at whether or not these are going to impact some of the things that you've identified are issues when you talk about in your needs assessment. What is it going to get to you to that point from your schools to that achieving academically during the day program? How is that going to link together, and what are those evidence-based interventions and activities to do that? So the program operations and attendance, we break that down a little bit more in the grant application, but we are definitely looking at programming of 30 days or more during a reporting period, and a reporting period is actually broken up into fall, spring, and summer. We also look at your academic progress and which is reported, and this could be some academic progress monitoring that your school uses, something like NWEA or similar. And then, of course, we'll provide some documents on how you provide that data as throughout in the reporting schedule. Collaboration and partnerships is critical. We do have a lot of our grantees that are currently our grantees now that work with a lot of folks in the community, and so this is something that we're looking for in terms of this new cohort because we think it's beneficial. And then there's certain requirements to justify those collaboration and partnerships, and demonstrating that through the memorandums of understanding that you have to include in your grant application. School safety resources. It's important that all our community learning centers adhere to safety within their schools, that there is a planning and there is a safe, that the services are being provided in a safe environment, and so there should be policies on that, student safety policies and procedures, as well as policies and procedures on safety and transportation. And certainly, of course, all volunteers and staff of 21st Century programs should adhere to the school policies and procedures and working with students such as background check clearances. I'm checking my time here. Okay. We certainly, the 21st Century program, because it's a recipient of, it is federal funds, so your grantees must comply with federal and state civil rights laws, including but not limited to Section 504, IDEA, Part B. So you also need to make sure that you have a policy in place for inclusion and equity. Services to adults. We do have some learning centers out there with our current grantee cohort that provide some services to family members. So applicants must provide services to the families of children who are served in the program. So local programs may offer services to support parental involvement and family literacy. Those are some examples. Each grantee is required to have a project coordinator. This project coordinator must devote 25 hours per week in the role of managing the 21st Century programs. There should be meals and snacks provided. You should work with your National School Lunch Program or USDA program, food program. The funds that are provided frown upon providing food and into their to the participants. So here are some resources available here on how to provide meals and snacks, but there's also a component in your application that talks about your plan on how you're going to do that. The program accountability and risk-based monitoring. So throughout the grant period, there's several types of reporting that's required. There's school-wide reporting. There's also program-specific reporting that's required, but there's also the federal reporting that's required for the grant, which is the 21 APR. And so these are things that we have in place to monitor to ensure that the funds are being implemented according to the approved application, as well as the approved activities, and that the funds are being used in a reasonable and prudent manner. And so it's been a real challenge, I think, for a lot of our grantees to comply with the reporting requirements. And so it's really important that you pay attention to this as part of the application, because we do follow up with reporting. And we make sure that that all our grantees are compliant. And the satisfactory, we will evaluate satisfactory progress throughout the grant period. So we look at different components that we require for reporting to do that. And then, of course, there's continuation funding requirements and grant modification requirements, and that's pretty much outlined in the application as well, and how we'll do that if you're selected for the grant. timely use of funds and carryover guidelines. So here again, this is a real important piece of the grant. We do expect our grantees to utilize their funds in a timely manner. We do have concerns with some schools about the carryover, so we wanted to make sure this was part of our application grant requirement. And so making sure that you are, if you're applying for the grant, that you have that capacity to comply with making sure that you are expending your funds in a timely manner. Fiscal monitoring, we do have some things in place that we look at your fiscal oversight program reviews through documents that we've created to just kind of get a temperature gauge on where you're at with your programs and the expenditure of funds, and we ask that you self-report that into our Native Star reporting system. And then additional reporting requirements, which I've been kind of mentioning in the past few slides. And then, of course, we will discuss those at length when you apply. And if you're selected, we'll have a training on all these things that we're covering right now. Okay, Marie.
Okay, so in terms of looking at the scoring weight for your application, the maximum possible points on an application can receive 110 points. And here we have the different points broken up into the different parts of the application. And so one of the ones that we're looking at is the application format and organization. That's worth 5 points. And then we did mention the statement of assurances and then the school information as part 1 and 2. And then part 3 is the bulk of the application, which is your project narrative, and that's 75 points. And then your part 4 is looking at your budget narrative and your budget spreadsheet, and that's 20 points. And one that's included on this application is competitive priority points, and that's 10 points. And that's looking at if your grant specific is, targeting STEM activities, college career readiness, and then also serving middle high schools that partner with business industries or post-secondary providers to offer that workplace or internship experiences for your students. And then also looking at fine and performing arts, project-based learning, and just providing that well-rounded education framework. And also the evidence-based family engagement activities. So those are, we consider those as part of the competitive priority points. And so one other thing too is just the applications that are not submitted in the required format specified on the grant application and a guidance packet, and non-submission of any of the 4 parts required will not be reviewed and automatically disqualified. Next slide. And here's the criteria for award. And so we're looking at the different categories of the application, and the application format and organization. What we're looking at specifically is that we're looking at a typed or printed single space on a 1.5 to 11 page paper, using a font no smaller than 11 point and times New Roman or similar. And then also that all pages should be organized according to the format provided in the application. And that each attachment must reference the section to which it corresponds. And also looking at the proposal being limited to a maximum of 20 pages. And that does include your statement of assurances. And then also just looking at the submission should only include parts 1 through 4 of the application. And those are the different parts that we'll be going over. And then again, part 1 is your school information, part 2, your statement of assurances, part 3 is your program narrative. Again, that's the bulk of the application. And so when we're looking at the program narrative, we're looking at the different components of that program narrative, such as your abstract, your statement of needs, program goals, program design, evaluation, collaboration and partnership, and then sustainability. So those are the different parts of your program narrative. And then also, again, just as I've mentioned, your program budget narrative and spreadsheet. And then also including the competitive priority points there as well. Next page, next slide.
Marie, it seems like you covered these areas again. They're just small snapshots of that screen before. Do you want to go through all those as well?
No, I'm going to be, I think I'm going to be repeating myself. Yeah, so these are just the different components in a bigger screenshot. Part one is the school information. Here we've got the application to where you'll be able to just enter the information in the gray areas. And so just making sure that you enter all the gray areas and with the information that it's asking for. And then also providing us with the authorized school representative, and then also the name of your project coordinator. And so we're asking for a name of your project coordinator primarily because, again, as part of this, the grant, we're saying that a project coordinator is required because that individual is going to be taking a lot of the responsibilities of implementing this program and, you know, coordinating the requirements of the program. And then also further down on the school information is we're requesting for the different the demographic data of your school, like the grades that you're currently serving, the number of students that that's enrolled in your school, and then your projected grades to be served by the program, by the 21st Century program, and then what you project your student participation in the program. And then also the days of operation. And then if you've been a recipient of the 21st Century Grant in the past, you check that. And then the dates that you've been funded and your most recent year's participation attendance. And that's all included on the school information. Next slide. Here's just a snapshot of the statement of assurances, and it's about 2 pages. So you enter your school information, and then your signatures of your school board president and your school administrator. And it's going to give you a feel where you can print the name of the individuals and then the date as well.
So just as Marie said, we just took a snippet of the assurances. It's pretty lengthy. I think it's like 1 through, 20, 30. So there's, quite a number of statements there. So make sure you read those through, and then of course have your signature of the individuals that need to sign these assurances. And part 3, your project narrative, as I had mentioned, that the first part of your project narrative is your abstract. And that's just providing a brief overview of the project. And then also just including a description of your typical day, activities proposed, and the intended outcomes. And what we've done for these, where you're going to enter your information, we've created these fields to where you're going to enter only so many characters. And so we're having you be very descriptive, but be concise, and just providing us a picture of what the abstract is going to be. And each part of this application is set up that way. And so in looking at your statement of needs and what we're having you do as applicants is have you review your school-wide comprehensive needs assessment and SMART goals to as you've identified your needs and your gaps, and use that as part of your needs assessment, the statement of need for your 21st Century program. And so, and you would just summarize your needs assessment with additional background information, and then also just that would help justify the selection of the project.
and how that your 21st century program is going to be coordinated between existing programs and services. And so, and just keeping in mind of the purpose of the grant, what are the goals? What are your goals of your program? What is that going to look like, and what is the need of that your project? And so again, there's a field for you to enter your information, providing that there are so many characters that you can enter in this. So as you're doing your planning and you're doing your needs assessment and what have you, bringing that back together, entering in this field with that many characters allowed in that field.
And let me just make a quick plug here under the statement of need. I know that your schools, all of your schools, have received about $30,000 to develop your comprehensive needs assessment. And so as you're developing this, and I think most of you are doing this, making sure that you look at this component, because certainly this will help in this portion of your project narrative. Right. And I think as you're looking at that comprehensive needs assessment too, again, just always remember that the 21st century program is supplemental. So what is it that's going on at your school that your base program is not covering or is not doing, and then what your Title I program, what gaps are still there that 21st century program can help with those needs. And then looking at your program goals as part of the project narrative again. And so as a recipient, you're expected to engage in a continuous improvement process that involves collecting and analyzing data. And then also, looking at that data to refine, improve, and strengthen your program. And so here, what we have in the three areas, the program purpose, what we're having you do is come up with your local goals, what your expected outcomes are going to be, and what your data sources are going to be. So to meet each of those areas. The next slide. And so, and looking at your program design, again, that's the bulk of project narrative. So as you, this is where you will provide detailed description of your proposed plan, and that this plan should provide an overview of activities that will be implemented to support the achievement of your program goals as outlined in the previous section. And so the program design is kind of broken up into the different areas as well. Here you're going to identify your project activities, and the first part of this webinar, we had mentioned that there is that list of authorized activities, and this is where you'll see those authorized activities, where it says below is a list of authorized activities. So that's coming directly from the Every Student Succeeds Act. So, and then also when you're looking at your program activities, we're looking to see the different types of academic enrichment programming and the different types of services and programs that would contribute to the overall student success. And then also looking at the different activities for your family engagement. And then also you have your competitive priority points as well. Do you have anything to add, Val? No, I just wanted to just say that I just now changed the slide. So as you can see, there's a continuation of those allowable activities. I think it ended at O from the previous slide, and then it continues here from P. But if you look at the application in itself, and if you're following along with your application side by side, you can see all the authorized activities on one page. And then, of course, as Marie talked about, the competitive points are assigned to the activities that are listed through 1 through 7. And so making sure when you complete this portion of the project narrative, you see a screenshot of a chart where you would enter in the letter of the authorized activity that's listed from A through W. So you first might say, okay, we're going to do a cultural program. So you enter P, and maybe that cultural program is a STEM project. So then you might enter 1 in the competitive service column. And then you'll talk about how that links to the local goals, enter the priority here, and then talk about that particular activity and then who's responsible. I want to make sure if we have questions on that. I'm going to check the chat box.
Okay, so do you want me to go ahead and move on?
Yeah, let's pause for a little bit. I want to see if any questions pop up in the chat box here. Okay, I don't see any, so go ahead and move on to the next next area.
Okay, and so here the other part of the project narrative is your recruitment and retention of students. When we do submit our report for the 21 APR, we always get there's a kind of like a cutoff of attendance, and so many of our schools were reporting 30 days or less of attendance for students, or they're different 30 to 59 days and so forth. And so because we're, as you described, let us know how many students you're going to serve from the beginning of this application. We want you to be able to keep that number of students throughout your grant cycle. So here in 2 and 3, we're having you describe your process or your strategies of how you're going to recruit students for your program and how you're going to retain those students and making sure that you're meeting that program attendance of 30 days or more. And so again, just provide us provide information on your application. And then also your staffing plan. In this section, you're going to provide an overview of how your program will be staffed. And then also, looking at your program coordinator position description and ensuring that that person is going to be working a minimum or at least 25 hours a week. And then also having that as an attachment to your application. And then also, we've provided space for you to describe how you're going to have that projected staff-student ratio, a list of the program positions, and then the responsibility associated with the position and so forth. And if you are going to use volunteers or even have your partnership, your collaboration with your partnership, if you can have different entities come in and provide services, how are you going to, how's the program going to recruit and use those qualified individuals to serve as volunteers? And then also describing potential professional development opportunities for your program staff. Next slide. And then also accessibility, as we've mentioned as part of the, when we were talking about the program requirement, is how are you going to transport students between school and home? And also how are you going to ensure their safety while they're traveling from the center to home? And then also how are you describing how the community will be made aware of the availability and location of your program? And then also, again, just a space, as we mentioned before, that you're going to let us know how you're going to provide snacks and meals to your students, your participants. And so, and working with your USDA or even working with your kitchen staff and how you're going to, include the reimbursement process and so forth. And so we've given you a space where you'll be able to provide that information. Next slide.
Okay, Marie, I have a question in here from someone who's asking about what is the required staff to student ratio. So I'm wondering if this individual is asking if we're requiring, like if we have a table of what is the staff to student ratio. I think that's what she's asking.
Yeah, no, we don't have a required staff to student ratio.
But you should describe here what that would be for your program, so we have an understanding what that's what is your projected staff to student ratio. So you'll talk about this here in the narrative, and then of course providing the list of program positions and then the responsibilities associated with that, and then the qualifications. I hope that answered your question, Lynette.
Okay, the other part of your project narrative is going to be your program evaluation. Again, in looking at the evaluation efforts, part of the reporting that we're going to be looking at is the list here, your federal data collection system, your summary, feedback summary, your achievement data, participation attendance, your budget expenditure reports, and as well as your evaluation. And so, in looking at the local federal reporting requirement, just describing how your program will coordinate with the regular day program to ensure that the program has access to the relevant data it needs to comply with your reporting requirements. And then also describing how you're going to collect the data and analyze who's going to be part of that process, and then also describing how the results are going to be translated into programmatic changes in terms of refining and making improvements of your program. And then also describing how your program evaluation results will be made available to the general public and how the public will be notified of the availability of those results. Next slide. And in looking at your collaboration with partnerships, here you're going to describe to us how you propose to work with, how you're going to coordinate and collaborate with the community-based partners, and by providing us a list of your partners and what the coordinated activities are going to be, and when this partnership is going to be established, or will it be, when you anticipate that to be established. Then also just summarizing your collaboration efforts and the space provided. The other one, the other part of your project narrative is your sustainability. With your sustainability, you're going to describe how you're going to be able to sustain this program once the grant cycle ends. Once you get this program started and the activities that you're providing, how are you going to sustain even the success of your program? How are you going to sustain that after this grant cycle ends? What is the role of the school leadership team in ensuring that high quality program building awareness of the value of the youth outcome? And, even collaboration with your partnership, how are you going to sustain that once this grant cycle ends? And then also, even if, just looking at the different funds or the different programming, this is the important part of your whole grant cycle as well. It's just being able to sustain what you're doing to make positive changes with your students. How are you going to sustain that process? Part 4 is your budget spreadsheet and narrative. Here, we just have the several areas, several budget line items. And what you're going to enter is the sum of for your before school activities, your after school activities, and your summer school activities. On the first, the third row there, where it says total grant yearly award requested, that's the amount that you're going to enter that you're requesting. And you're going to break that down into before, after school, summer school. And so that entire amount should equal back to what you're requesting as as a yearly grant award. Next slide. Your budget narrative, you're going to provide descriptive explanation of the costs for the line items. And so again, we've provided space for you to enter your information for personnel services, benefits, travel, family engagement. Again, this aligns back to the budget spreadsheet, and you're going to provide the descriptive justification for each of those items. And when you're looking at the personnel services, you're going to provide us the different positions you're going to fund, and then also just the different activities you're going to provide under each of those budget line items. Val, do you have anything to add?
No, only that this part is really important, the narrative, just for the fact that sometimes we'll get like really one sentence descriptions, and oftentimes that really doesn't tell us what that means. For example, like materials and supplies, we'll get things like teaching supplies and materials. Okay, we need a little bit more information than that. What is it that you need? And then we look at the alignment between what you have for your budget and how that aligns to your activities. So you'll need to provide a little detailed information in those budget line items, and making sure that it aligns to your activities in all of those budget line items.
Okay. Okay, and so looking at the award parameters, I did see a lot of some questions coming up on what to expect when they're requesting for the maximum amount. Here we have the parameters in terms of looking at what you anticipate to have as number of participants in your program, your average daily membership of your program. So when you're looking at having 25 to 40 students, then we're having the maximum amount to request is $95,000. So, and then also, and it goes from 41 participants to 60, and so 110,000 and so forth. So this is kind of the parameter of what the amount to request on your application. And so, and to maximize the statewide impact, the BIE reserves the right to reduce or eliminate award amounts for the following reasons. And of course, but not limited to that, if a school may be awarded a minimum of $50,000. And if your school was awarded in the 2016-19 cohort, your participant attendance will be considered for the award amount determination. And again, if you were awarded, if you're in the current cohort, then if you had the carryover balances or have had funds pulled back, that will also be considered in your award amount determination. And then also the other thing we'll be looking at is analysis of per pupil expenditures. Another one is just funding is contingent upon continued funding from the ESSA Title IV Part B. And that your year-to-year funding will be based on meeting program goals and objectives through the measurable outcomes concerning student achievement, participation, and family engagement.
So I want to also emphasize here too, because we have folks that are wanting to apply from the previous cohort. So please pay attention to those previous cohort bullet points, especially regarding attendance. I know that we're tracking the reporting, and along with that reporting is attendance. So there's a couple of ways that we've allowed our current grantees to do reporting for attendance, and one of those was the OST-LMS system and the NACES system. So we're actually right now looking at those two systems in particular for attendance. And so although you may be documenting that hard copies at your site, we're monitoring that, you know, in those two individual systems. And so again, these are things that we've provided to you and how we're looking at that through training. So, but I would definitely pay attention to those areas for the previous cohorts.
And the other thing I want to add to is what the maximum amount requested, like for instance, the 95,000, that's going to be per year. So, so every school year, that's what your the maximum amount requested. Next slide. Examples of allowable costs, just like from the budget narrative. These are just some examples of what's allowable. And again, we're looking at what's necessary and reasonable. So I'm not going to go through the list here, but you know, again, all expenditures must be prudent and reasonable, and must align to your plan or to your application.
Right, so just making sure that you're looking through your expenditures and just making sure that they fall within the allowable activities, but also just, you know, deciding whether or not, you know, you're looking at your purchases and thinking like, is this reasonable? Is this, you know, could be considered not allowable? Because any questionable costs will always be questioned. And so when you put that down, and as if you do get selected for the grant, that's something we look at very closely, is your expenditures, and especially if we see things that are unreasonable and not allowable.
And so moving on to review and scoring process, we do have the application review process. So all applications submitted will be scored, and also with the BIE staff, the SAP staff that we have, will only review applications submitted for accuracy and eligibility, and that all applications will be rated according to the following factors. So BIE will be identifying and assigning personnel experience and expanded learning to review all applications, and that each reviewer will rate and score each submitted application. And that upon all individual reviews, the reviewer ratings will be tabulated and average score will be calculated for each application. In instances where there are large discrepancies between individual reviewer scores, a meeting will take place with the reviewers, and a final score will be calculated through a consensus of all reviewers. And also that the BIE state coordinator will make the final funding award determinations based upon the review of the average scores, looking at the applicant ranking from highest scores to lowest score, and that will also be based upon available funding levels. And so also the other funding award determination will be based on, again, just the average scores, and then also the number of students and families to be served and availability of funds. Again, just for, as we mentioned earlier, the application is due March, and we estimate to inform all applicants of the final awarding decisions through email on or before May 31st. 2019. And so the other part of the review and scoring process is the rejection of proposals. BIE reserves the right to reject any application if it doesn't adhere to the eligibility criteria, funding specifications, application preparation instructions, or late submissions. And then also replicating another grant application is also it's at the discretion of BIE to remove a grant application if there is that replication of another grant application. And also BIE staff will be available for limited phone consultation with potential applicants, and that through in terms of technical assistance, and then also just answering questions about the program requirements or clarifying application instructions.
So we're not going to go into too much detail here. Again, we need to remain impartial, and so we throughout this grant process, so we cannot recommend a particular program focus or develop program objectives for you or help you with that, or assist in developing local partners for applicants. And so the assistance that we're able to provide are very general assistance in terms of questions that you may have, maybe clarifying questions that you might have on the application. And there's a question about replication, meaning what this really means is that if you go online, because you can do that these days, and do a query search and then find applications for 21st century and say, oh yeah, hey, this sounds good, and you copy a big portion of that application, then that is what we would consider replication. Okay, I'm going to jump on to the next question, or the next slide.
Okay. And so here is the appeal process. Appeals will be considered from applicants who are dissatisfied with their application's final score. However, the award amounts are final and may not be appealed. The process is that you can appeal your final application score within 10 calendar days of receiving your official notification, and then that the request must be submitted in writing to the BIE 21st Century State Coordinator and must provide specific factual information on the reason for appealing their final score. And that BIE, Division of Performance and Accountability, will review the appeal by convening an internal team review team, and also make that final determination of whether the appeal is approved or denied. And that the findings of that review team will be shared with the applicant within 30 days of their request for appeal.
Are you good with that? Grant writing? Are you good with that?
The bureau ones I can.
Yeah, you're used to.
Okay, and here is the timeline, application timeline. I know I've seen some questions of when the application is due. So again, as we mentioned from the beginning of this webinar, that the application was released on January 22nd. And then we also have this particular technical assistance webinar, as well as 4 other webinars in one more in January, 2 in February, and 1 more in March. So we'll be providing the same information on those dates provided there, and that the application is due March 25th. If you send it by USPS, the United States Postal Services, the application needs to be postmarked by March 25th. If it's electronically submitted, it's due by 11:59 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. And then also awards will be announced by May 31st. And we anticipate that awards will begin July 1st. And we also do anticipate an awards recipient training in August. And also we wanted to provide you information on the three-year grant period here for the 2019-2022 grant cycle. So your initial year is going to start July 1st, 2019 and end June 30, 2020. So then you have year 2 and 3 to implement your program. So this grant, the new grant cycle should be ending June 30, 2022. So your application submission, again, the deadline, March 25th, and we want the schools to submit one completed application by the due date. And there are 2 methods of for you to submit your application. Again, the USPS mail or electronically. And hand-delivered applications are discouraged. Faxed applications will not be accepted. And so if you're going to send using the Postal Service, we have the address provided there. And then also if you're going to electronically submit your application, we have the email to where you can submit your application. If the application is approved, funds will be distributed July 1st. Applications will not be returned, but copies will be made available upon request. So please keep a copy of your application on file. Additional technical assistant webinars are another one is scheduled for next week, 2 in February and 1 in March, and the times and the dates are provided there.
The access information for the webinars are also on the flyer. So if you requested an application, I'll also send you the announcement, which has the flyer or the webinar access information. So I'll send that to you.
And okay. Go ahead, Val.
All right, so here's our contact information. If you need to answer or have some questions answered or some clarification on any of the things that were provided here on the presentation, you can certainly give us a call or email us. We're happy to provide any assistance. I know that we've went over. And so I am going to go ahead and stay on for a little bit to answer a few more questions. But if you do have to leave this call, certainly you're welcome to do so. We don't want to keep you any longer than you have to be on the call. So thank you for joining us. Before you leave and want additional information, just make sure that you have your name, your school name, and your email so that I can make sure that I send you information on this presentation that we provided today. Thank you. There is a question on here from a school about the how do you complete the allowable activities document. I think it was Kim. Let me go back to your question. Kim Peters. Okay, Kim. So you wanted to know, okay, maybe it wasn't Kim. It was, yes, it was Kim. So on the application activity, you enter letter, and competitive service, you enter numbers. Are you allowed to choose only one? So let's go back to that in the presentation, and I'll review that with you really quickly. So here it is. So these are we have them split on two screens, which makes it a little bit difficult. So you have A through W, and then you have the competitive points here. So you would select which program. So example, let's just use the ones we have on the screen. You have cultural programs. So you may have like several cultural programs that you're going to provide. So what you'll do is put a P here. And if it's maybe something that's related to STEM, then you would put the number 1 here. Then you would enter the goals and the activities related to that cultural programming, okay? So that's how you would identify that. But you can also pick another allowable activity and enter that information here. So you can, as your question say, are you allowed to choose only one? You can choose multiple activities. And also looking at the competitive points. But once you've addressed one of the competitive points, you'll only be allowed to get whatever we've allowed for that competitive points. You won't get 3 different sets of, competitive points for each of the ones you've identified. I hope that makes sense. Okay, let me look through other questions. The one thing I want to just emphasize on the call is that we don't want you to include personal identifying information. We don't want to have people's names, kids' names on your application. You can identify them, as staff 1, staff 2, program coordinator, and but we don't want anybody's names on the application. So don't include that. Let me see if there are any more questions.
Al?
Yes.
This is Marie. I gotta go now.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's fine. Okay.
I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Okay. Bye.